Secure your tinfoil hats, buckle down tight, and hold on loosely as we soar over the rocky tops of the La Platas on a rocky mountain high, get sucked into the vortex of the Four Corners, and settle down snugly at mile marker 420 in colorful Colorado. It is Saturday, September 11th, Sunday, September 12th for those of you across the pond and beyond. Welcome to We Are Paradox Media's Late Night in the Rockies. I'm so glad you could join us this evening. I'm your host, TessaTNT, and I hope you had an awesome weekend so far, and I'm so grateful that you are joining us tonight. If you're joining us right now on one of our many outlets, you are listening to us live on Spreaker.com under We Are Paradox Media. You can also find us live on KPNL Radio, which you can find at kpnl-db.com. If you would like to follow us and subscribe, make sure you look us up on YouTube. You can also find us on Twitter, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, iTunes, iHeartRadio, CastBox, Tumblr, SoundCloud, TuneIn Radio, Deezer, Podcast Addict, as well as Podcast Chaser. So tonight, we are going to have a show. We were supposed to have Psychic Chris Garcia on, but his birthday is tomorrow, and his mother wanted to take him out for his birthday tonight. So I'm hoping he's having a wonderful time. And I hope you guys who are planning on calling in tonight don't take it too hard. He's going to come back later on, hopefully. But I hope he does have a really good time out there with his mom. There's nothing really quite as wonderful as family time. So tonight, in his stead, we shall be doing a show called the 20th Anniversary and Remembering 9/11. Many people often ask, where were you on 9/11? Where were you when the towers were hit? Where were you and what were you doing when the towers fell? And it was, for me, I had just moved into a new house. I was a single mother of a wee little baby. She was my very first child. She is now 21 and expecting her first child here right near Valentine's Day, the day before. And so I'm unpacking. I had not yet even plugged in my TV. And my Uncle Bill, who I refer to as my Uncle Daddy Bill, because he did raise me after my mother died, and my dad had a really hard time with it and, sent us on to different family members. He was a real big staple in my life. Anyhow, he called me and he's like, "What are you doing?" Like, well, I'm just unpacking and cleaning, doing dishes, taking care of Kinsey. He's like, Are you watching the TV? And I said, "No, I haven't even plugged it in yet." And he said, "Well, you need to plug it in right now. You need to plug it in and see what's going on." And I did, and it was, and still to me today, the most horrific thing that I had ever seen or experienced. Man, I was watching it last night with my son, and it was just so sad seeing this happen, seeing our worlds being torn apart, and seeing, people dying and being stuck there. There was so much confusion, not only security services there, but also people, dispatchers from 911 telling people, just stay where you're at. People are coming for you. Had it been me, I would say go to your nearest exit and try to get out, or get as far down as you can. And it may be easier to find them that way. No way in hell would I tell them to stay where they're at, because that is the worst thing anybody could ever do in a situation like that. And I implore you, if that ever happens to you, please find the nearest exit and get the hell out of the building. All right, I got a poem that I wrote. Give me 1 second. I wrote this last night after watching 9/11 videos, and my kids were off in the bedroom, and they were watching their own little videos and playing their games and doing their own little thing, and my smallest Lily was really tired, so she went to sleep early, and Floyd's like, "Well, I just want to hang out with you." And I was like, "Son, I really don't think you should be watching this. Like, this is pretty scary, sad stuff. Could you please go do something else?" He's like, "No, I just want to hang out with my mom." So he was very surprised at some of the things I was telling him and some of the things that he was witnessing, because our schools, they tell our kids, and even us as we were kids, different things, but they don't give us the full and extended truth. And he was just very, very surprised. He knew small little things about what had happened, but not the full truth, not about the planes hitting, what terrorists are, etc. So it was a pretty, I think, kind of bonding experience and learning experience for him. And at one point he's like, Mom, my eyes are watering. Can you see my eyes are watering? And I'm like, yes, son, mine are too. This is very sad. I don't know, for me, being empathic, I just feel like I could feel what others are feeling, but I think as a human being, all of us that day could really feel what was going on and just the sheer brutality of it. So Champ in the chat room, aka Nick French, is saying, I was in elementary school in art class when it happened. And I was reading yesterday, before the videos came out on History Channel, about a guy who was in school as well. He was actually in choir class, and he said his teacher came in. He's always so cheerful and happy and upbeat, and he said he looked like he had seen a ghost. And they're like, what's wrong? And he's like, well, my bosses don't want me to tell you what's happening, but I think you guys are old enough, and this kid is 10 or 11 years old. I think you guys are old enough to know the truth. And he told them what was going on, and of course everyone freaked out. And actually one of his classmates were on one of the planes. She was on the plane that hit the Pentagon. She was on her way to Australia. Little did they know what was really going to happen that day. Such a very scary and sad day. What was really especially scary, not that this was not scary enough, but there was a knowing or a thought process that was given to us by our government, our president at the time, Mr. George W., who said that this was not going to be the only attack. There was going to be another attack shortly after this. So we were all just on the edge of our seats wondering where this other attack was going to come from. So it was very, very scary. So I did, after sitting and watching these 9/11 videos and reliving this horrific tragedy, have a poem going through my head. And I used to write a lot in my younger years. I was published a few times. But due to certain circumstances, aka an abusive relationship, I lost my artistic and poetic abilities. I was in the Art Honor Society. I had so many different things going on. But I just felt the urge to write a poem, and I'm a little rusty, so please don't judge, but I'd like to read this poem to you guys right now. We will never forget the lives lost, the lives changed, and the way our world was warped that day. The day the towers were struck and then hit ground zero. The day so many felt they failed but were really our heroes. The day so many worlds came tumbling down. After that moment, a piercing silence, as if no one was around. 20 years ago seems like it was yesterday to me, but perhaps to others going through their own personal loss of loved ones and struggles within their own worlds, it seems like forever and yesterday at the same time, infinity. I will hopefully never understand the true loss so many experienced that day and days to follow, but my heart and prayers are still reaching out to them up to this day and into tomorrow. Forever is long. How long they will be affected by this horrific and tragic sorrow. In our hearts, we will never forget, and our lives will forever be changed from what happened, and by all the souls that were lost and still perish today from 9/11/2001. Thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Please bless, heal, and bring peace and joy to all souls affected by this day. In this name I pray. Amen. So that's something that came to me last night that I really, really just felt like I needed to write and share with my brothers and sisters. And just thinking about it is just very, very sad. still even today, 20 years later. And like I said in my poem, it really doesn't seem like that long. It just seems like yesterday. And then I look into my mind's eye and I see Kinsey running around in her diapers and really nothing else. She was just like me as a kid. You couldn't really keep clothes on me or shoes. But just running around happy, not a care in the world, not even knowing what's going on in our world. I'm so grateful that we did not have that loss. The second loss, the second attack that they were saying would happen. Yes, we had one after the other within a very, very short frame time. So Jim just lost us. I'm telling him to reset. And if you guys ever have that experience, if you're listening and the sound goes out, a lot of times it's Spreaker, something going on with their program. All you have to do is just reset and it'll bring you back. So I found this article last night after Chris contacted me and said he wouldn't be able to make the show tonight, which was kind of, I think, perfect timing. I think it was meant to happen this way, because what better way to have a show on 9/11, especially the 20th anniversary, than to reset ourselves, take ourselves back, and remember what happened that day. So I found this one on AARP, and it's called Remembering the 9/11 Terrorist Attacks 20 Years Later. And this article is survivors telling us what they saw and what they learned in the intervening years. It's hard to fathom that teens now entering college or serving in the armed forces were not yet born on that unforgettable Tuesday morning. Nearly 3,000 people died in Manhattan, at the Pentagon, and in the Pennsylvania field on September 11, 2001, in what remains the deadliest act of terrorism in history. To mark the 20th anniversary of that infamous day, we asked people with a connection to the attacks to reflect on what they experienced then and what it means to them today. So, Bill Keegan, a lieutenant in the Port Authority Police Department. The World Trade Center in Lower Manhattan was a beacon to the whole world. It said, "We want to know who you are. We want to work with you, and we want to trade with you. Trade allows us to understand different cultures and different people, and for them to understand us. I think that is why these terrorists targeted these towers." At 8:46 a.m., American Airlines Flight 11 from Boston, bound for Los Angeles, crashed into the World Trade Center's North Tower between the 93rd and 99th floors. Here it says Margaret Lazaros, a systems analyst for Empire Blue Cross Blue Shield, who worked on the 27th floor of the building. "It was unbelievable. It's even hard to explain. It was such a noise and such an impact that you actually felt it. It felt like the building shuddered. I thought everything was going to fall down. We just all stood there, looking at each other, and I remember I said to my girlfriend, 'Something bad happened. I think we need to get out of here.'" Ada Rosario Dolce, principal of the Leadership and Public Service High School, 3 blocks south of the towers. "I was in the school's lobby, greeting students. One of them says, 'A plane hit the World Trade Center building.' I thought, sure, a little piper. She says, 'A big one.' I say, 'What do you mean, a big one?' She says, 'It looks really bad, Mrs. Dolce.'" Vincent Green, a top anti-corruption official in the city's Department of Investigation, who was in an office that faced the Twin Towers. "We didn't think it was an attack at that point. We thought it was some pilot who didn't know what the heck he was doing." Brenda Berkman, a lieutenant in the New York City Fire Department. "I was off duty. I was at home in Brooklyn having my second cup of coffee when I got a phone call from Kentucky. It was my ex-partner's mother saying, 'Turn on your television.'" Oh my gosh, I just got goosebumps. "When I saw the North Tower burning, I immediately thought it was terrorism, because I knew, based on my experience, that that amount of fire could not have been set by a small plane or helicopter." 9:03 a.m., United Airlines Flight 175, also headed from Boston to LA, crashed into the World Trade Center's South Tower between the 77th and 85th floors. Investigator Green. I saw the second plane come around and go into the building. I told my colleague, "This is no accident. We are under attack." Michael Lomonaco, Chief and Director of Culinary Operations at Windows on the World, a restaurant on the North Tower's 106th and 107th floors. I'd been in the shopping center on the lower level when the North Tower was hit. They evacuated us very quickly. I made a couple of calls to let people know I was safe. Then I heard a roar of jet engines. I looked up at the South Tower and saw the moment of impact. A fireball exploded. This was a tremendous shock. I thought all of my friends and colleagues at the restaurant, and I started to do a mental list. Who's up there now? Who's working? We had 72 of our Windows family working that morning. We also had more than 100 people in a private dining room. So after the second plane hit, I became emotional and felt tears well up in my eyes. Lolita Jackson, an assistant vice president for Morgan Stanley Investment Management's mutual fund sales department, who worked on the 70th floor of the South Tower. We were told to listen to our company's head of security, Rick Riscorla, and he told us to leave. It took about 35 minutes to get out of the building. I didn't know the towers got hit by planes, but standing there on the street, it looked like something from the towering inferno. It's hard to remember that 20 years ago, there was no Twitter. There was no Facebook. There was no internet the way we know it now. So we had no way of knowing what was going on unless somebody texted you. The Port Authority was telling people not to leave. The only reason we all lived is that Rick ignored what they were saying. Thank God, and I'm saying this personally, thank God Rick was working that day, because that to me is just plain ignorance. Just stay where you're at. One of the things that really infuriated me last night was hearing somebody pleading for their life, calling 911. This guy just kept telling him, just stay where you're at. Just stay where you're at. The fire department's coming for you. Just stay there. And he's like, well, I really think that I should leave, but I can't see what's going on. Could you give me some direction? He's like, I'm telling you, just stay where you're at, and I'm hanging up now. And he hung up on this poor guy. Seriously, get the fuck out of there. So Salvatore Cassano, a fire department assistant chief of operations who became chief of operations right after September 11th. The World Trade Center was built to withstand a plane crash. Well, it withstood the plane crash, it just didn't withstand the fire from the thousands of gallons of jet fuel that were incinerating everything in there. Systems analyst Lazaros. We got into the stairwell, and it was so quiet. Everybody knew something really bad had happened, and everybody just wanted to get out of there. We all just started walking and walking and walking down. We saw the firefighters, a lot of them. They started coming up the stairwell, so we all moved over for them. They had so much equipment on them, and it was smoky, and they were sweating already. They were walking up the stairs. We asked them, "Where are you going? Where do you have to go?" They said, "Oh, we have to get underneath the fire, but you go." They had all these ropes and things, and all those guys never got out of there. Never. We got to the end of the stairwell and went through the open door. At first, we had no idea where we were. I said, this must be some kind of old sub-basement, somewhere that's full of debris. It was the lobby we had come into in that morning, but everything had been destroyed. Stanley Premnath, an assistant vice president for Fuji Bank, who worked on the 81st floor of the South Tower. I'd seen huge chunks of fireballs falling from the North Tower. I took an elevator to the 78th floor of my building to switch to an express elevator to leave. The security guard said, Your building is safe, is secure, go back to your office. I stepped back into the elevator and went back into my office, and the phone was ringing, so I answered it. I'm standing up with a phone in my hand, and I see something gray, a plane, small at first, then larger and larger. I'm mesmerized, not realizing a plane is coming toward me. The plane starts to tilt, and it looks like time just stopped. And it's happening in flashes of a minuscule second. I can hear the revving sound of the engine, and the plane is coming closer, closer, closer. I dropped the phone and I screamed, and I dove under the desk. All I remember saying at that time was, "Lord, I can't do this. You take over." The bottom wing took out most of the floor I was on. It looked like a demolition crew came and ripped the entire office apart. Every piece of furniture was mangled. The only desk that stood firm was the desk I was hiding under. The Bible was on top of that desk. That's the only reason I can attribute to why I was saved. The ceiling above me collapsed, and the sprinkler system came on. I was screaming for somebody to help me. "Please don't leave me to die." Somebody on the floor heard me, and a person had a flashlight. Brian Clark, an executive vice president of Euro Brokers who worked on the 84th floor and was one of his office's volunteer marshals. I got down to the 81st floor landing and was confronted by a heavy-set woman coming up the stairs with one of her co-workers. She said, "Stop, you can't go down. We have just come off a floor in flames." She blocked us and the people I was with. This chain of 7 or 8 co-workers behind me all went bump, bump, bump. Now we're all standing on this rather tiny landing, and the debate began, up or down. About 30 seconds into this, I was distracted by a banging noise, a muffled cry. I dropped out of the debate and concentrated on what I was hearing. I made out this male voice calling for help. Clark's Euro Brokers colleagues turned around and headed back up the stairs with 2 people who had come from below. I went on into the 81st. It was dark on this floor, no electricity, and some black smoke. The stranger's voice was, I'm guessing, 20 yards away. My flashlight beam was like a headlight or high-beam headlight on a country road at night in the fog. You just saw the particles, but nothing else. The flashlight caught him and went down into his eyeballs. He said to me, "One thing I got to know, do you know Jesus Christ?" I said, "I go to church every Sunday. Come on, we've got work to do here. Let's move here." Premnath. I'm confronted by one lousy wall, a dry wall that stood firm. The man with the flashlight said, "Climb over, I'll catch you on the other side." At this point, I'm banging up, bruised, bloodied. He stood on a desk, reached over the top of the wall, and grabbed me in a headlock. I squirmed, and he pulled, and I flew over on the other side. I knocked him off his feet. When I realized where I was lying on top of this guy. He got up. I don't know how to thank this man. I grab him, give him a kiss on the cheek. Clark. I dusted myself off and put my hand up and said, "I'm Brian," he said. "I'm Stanley. We'll be brothers for life." Premnath. He said, "All my life I've lived as an only child. I always wanted a brother." Clark. At that instant, I noticed that I had punctured my right palm. He had a puncture wound on one of his palms too. I smushed our hands together and said, "In fact, we'll be blood brothers." Premnath. This guy did something, this act of kindness and love, that I will go to the grave remembering. Clark. I said, "Now, come on, let's go." We looked down the stairs and didn't see any flames, just the smoke coming up, and the stairs were empty. Premnath. We walk all the way down on the ground floor. I can hear the firefighters, the cops, and the EMS workers, and all these men and women in uniform. They're belching orders. "Run, run, run! Do not look up. Do not look around. Just go." And as they were sending us to safety, you could hear the scream behind us because the building was crumbling. These men and women were sacrificing their lives so Brian and I could go to safety. Oh my God, I got goosebumps really bad again. So Clark's company lost 61 people that day. Premnath's lost 23. Cantor Fitzgerald, an investment bank based on the 101st through 105th floors of the North Tower, lost 658. Only 18 people from the South Tower's impact zone survived. Premnath and Clark were among them. They remain close friends. 9:37 a.m. American Airlines Flight 77, bound for Washington area to LA, crashed into the western side of the Pentagon. Specialist Bo Dubozynski, a soldier with the 3rd U.S. Infantry Regiment who was working as a Pentagon tour guide. All of a sudden, this one airman comes running up to the bottom ramp, and he's just beet red. He screams, "We've got to get out of here. A plane just hit the Pentagon." It was a lot of chaos. We had people that were on fire. We tackled them and put them out. Vina Relin, MD, a medical officer at the Pentagon. I've never seen people running like that. My first burn victim was an Army officer. His arm had 3rd-degree burn and his foot was also burned. His face had no expression on it. I started the IV, gave him some morphine. I was trying to get a wheelchair for him, but he said, "Ma'am, just wrap it, give it to me, and I will walk." I didn't even think he could walk with that pain. That officer picked up the IV bag, holding his arm straight, and he walked straight out. The next day, the Pentagon was open, and we all were there. One of the psychologists asked me, "Would you like to talk?" I said, "Talk about what?" "I've got work to do." You cannot believe that somebody had the gall to use our plane, use our people, hit us in a building that's the pride of our nation. 9:59 a.m. The South Tower collapsed. Principal Dolch. We had evacuated all the students to the south toward Battery Park. As we were crossing into the park, I heard the sound that I always describe as snap, crackle, and pop. I looked back and I thought the world had come to an end. Every time I think about it, I shiver. It was just a tsunami wave of dirt and debris just behind us. Chef Le Monaco. Suddenly, as I was looking at the Twin Towers, one of them disappeared in a cloud of smoke. It literally disappeared. There were mothers with strollers. There were elderly people. There were thousands of people who were running north on Church Street away from this collapse. Investigator Green. It was hypnotic, almost. I'm looking out the window, and I see a cloud of debris coming up the street. I see people running, and it was like I couldn't even move. I'm just watching this, like this isn't real. Fire Department of New York Assistant Chief Cassano. We took refuge in a garage across the street from the World Trade Center, where our command post was set up. This huge plume of smoke and debris came raining down, and we waited for it to clear. The devastation that we saw was just so hard to believe, and we knew that if we had happened to the South Tower, that the North Tower would certainly collapse as well. That's why we were trying to get people out of there as quickly as we could. I had gotten hit with some debris, but I didn't realize it. I had injuries to my back and ribs, so I was having trouble moving pretty quickly. I started to try to figure out what was going on, to see how many people we had, just to try to get a handle on how many people were missing, and then to figure out what we were going to do. It was a daunting task. I never had time to think about anything other than what my job was. We were working 18 hours a day. Will Jamino, a Rookie Port Authority police officer who had responded from his post in Midtown Manhattan and was on the concourse level of the World Trade Center. I heard a humongous boom. I saw a fireball the size of my house, and I'm just standing there looking up. Everything's shaking like an earthquake. At that point, I just got picked up and slammed. I was thrown onto my back. A wall fell on my whole left side. I don't know how to describe it, except that it seemed like a million freight trains coming down on us. Then all of a sudden, everything went silent. and I found myself in a pitch-black cavern, and I couldn't move. I was there with Sergeant John McLaughlin, who was pinned under debris, and Officer Dominic Pizzulo, who had some room to maneuver. Dominic started trying to get this concrete off me. He really couldn't. He tried pulling it off me for 15 minutes, 20 minutes. That's when we heard another boom, and it was now the other tower coming down on us. And at that point, I figured we were going to die. I look over to Dominic, and something had hit him and sat him down, literally like a rag doll. I could see red coming out of my fellow officer's mouth. At that point, he just said, "Willie, I'm hurt bad." He goes, "I'm dying, bro. Don't let anybody forget that I died trying to save you guys." And I said, "Dominic, I would never let anybody ever forget what you did." So there's a little video at the end of this article that says, "Caught buried alive in 9/11 inspires others." So let's see how this goes. I don't know if there's going to be commercials or what.
It looked like Armageddon. We found ourselves in a very dark little void. I was trapped for a total of 13 hours. And at that point, I determined that if I'm going to die, I'm going to fight till the end.
Never give up. Caught buried alive on 9/11 inspires others.
On September 11th, I started my day off like every day. I'd kiss Allison goodbye. She was 7 months pregnant. I went into the next bedroom, kissed my 4-year-old daughter, and I'd get in my truck and drive from New Jersey into Midtown Manhattan. I was named Port Authority police officer from the Port Authority Police of New York and New Jersey. Our radios crackled, asking us to come back to the police desk. And that's when I saw the Tower 1 on fire. There were papers flying throughout the air. There was a lot of dust. There was a lot of debris. Building 1 had the big gaping hole with smoke coming out of it. Sergeant McLaughlin had asked for volunteers. Myself, Dominic Pizzulo, Antonio Rodriguez volunteered, and we started running toward the buildings. We got into Building 5, I would say approximately 9:30, maybe a little bit after that. When we heard the humongous boom, I turned around and looked into Lobby 2. I didn't know what to do. I was just standing there. It was like an earthquake. Everything was shaking. Sergeant McLaughlin, he said, run toward the elevator shaft. And the building was actually coming down, and I found myself literally buried alive under concrete. It was dark, and then after a little bit, I could see some light start coming in from above me. About 20 to 30 feet up, there was a hole. I yelled out to my Sarge with some colorful words, "We're going to make it out of this hellhole. If not, we're going to die trying." Because at that point, I realized if I had given up, I would have given up on my sergeant because nobody could hear him. I would have given up on my family because I didn't fight hard enough to get home. And at that point, I determined that if I'm going to die, I'm going to fight till the end. So this is my ID and my actual shield that I was wearing on 9/11. So I was buried with both of these. They both survived, and luckily I was able to get them back after the attacks. The physical recovery was tough. The physical challenge I face is just more being able to do things that I used to do that I can't do anymore. I have a disability, I have a challenge, and I just have to work around it. The mental recovery was tough. I didn't know that I was suffering from PTSD right after 9/11. It wasn't an easy road. I had to talk to several different people, but finally ended up with a therapist that I felt comfortable with, and one that taught me that you're never going to get rid of PTSD, but you can learn to live with it, you can learn to control it. Unfortunately, I had to retire as a police officer. I didn't want to, and it's something that took a big blow to my dream of becoming a police officer. In 2003, a friend of mine asked me to come to speak to a school of 3rd and 4th graders who were afraid to get on planes. The day that you feel you can't overcome something, think about that guy that came to talk and say, listen, if he made it, why can't I? And then other people would keep calling me to different events, and those events led to, again, a purpose. For the last several years, children and parents and educators kept saying, you should have a kid's book. In 2020, I hooked up with my co-author, Charles Ricciardi. We gave it a go, and the book, Immigrant American Survivor, came to fruition. I'm very proud of it. You know, it's important for me to share my story because I have found people that have been inspired by it. When I look at this uniform, I think about the good people that I was able to, be alongside of and the positive impact we had on September 11th. I think my life mission has always been to help people. The phrase never give up means everything to me because I had to dig down deep when I was buried alive under the Trade Center, and that helped me get out and get to my family and get back home. And I'm here 20 years later to tell everybody, never give up. I don't care what's going on in your life, just don't give up.
That was so very scary, sad, and amazing at the same time. It's amazing how so many people have been resilient and persevered through all of this and not let it get them down. So many people. I was reading earlier about a photographer who was there in the building, and then as the South Tower was hit, was leaving, I don't know, he took so many good pictures. He took it so hard. He had nightmares every night, suffered from PTSD, depression, and all he wanted to do was sleep. And he was talking about how his family just really suffered through all of that. But I'm just really so grateful for all the men and women who sacrificed their lives for others to get them out of there. I still can't today wrap my mind around how people are telling others to just stay where you're at. Even 9/11 dispatchers from 911. To me, it is just plain insanity. So I've got a number of other things that I would like to share. Let me look at this article from ABC News. So, on the 20th anniversary of 9/11, questions, anger, and death linger. And again, this is from ABC News by Bill Hutchinson, Josh Margolin, James Gordon Meek, Jenny Wagner-Quartz, and Jinsel Jung. And there is a video here. But I'm going to read this first and then go back to the video. Though she has no independent recollection of her mother, Patricia Smith has spent 20 years missing and learning about her. Through stories imparted by relatives, family, friends, and Google searches, she has pierced and pieced her mom together like a shattered mirror reflecting an adventure-seeking person who once ran the bulls in Papelona and swam across New York's Lake Placid. From a thin chain around Smith's neck dangles a pendant spelling out her mother's name in gold cursive letters. But a badge, New York police officer Maura Smith wore on that crisp late summer morning in lower Manhattan, sits scratched and dented at the National September 11th Memorial and Museum, testament to the only female among 23 NYPD officers killed in the surprise attack on the World Trade Center. It's the only piece of jewelry, hers that I'll wear, Patricia Smith, now 21, said of the necklace. I get so nervous that I'll lose something. I feel that I only have so many things of hers left that I want to keep all of it. Saturday marks the 20th anniversary of the most lethal attack on history on American soil. A commemoration of the 2,977 people killed when 19 terrorists from half a world away hijacked and turned 4 commercial aircraft into missiles that rained death on New York City, the Pentagon, and a field in rural Shanksville, Pennsylvania. That day of terror brought about changes, large and small, such that it is difficult to find some part of American life that hasn't been touched by the effects of September 11th, 2001. From ramped-up security at airports to the militarization of policing, 2 years-long wars, and the very fabric of our country's personality and freedoms, the nation and world have been defined by the events of 9/11. When I talk about 9/11 to my students, I begin by explaining to them that it was really a life-changing event. It changed the way that our government works, its focus on terms of protection and the American people. It changed the way Americans live today, said former U.S. Attorney General Alberto Gonzales, the dean of the Belmont University Law School in Nashville, who was White House counsel to then President George W. Bush on 9/11. We obviously wanted Americans to live their lives as normally as possible, but to understand that we live and operate in a very dangerous world where there are people, there are organizations, there are groups that don't have very kind views about our way of life, about our values, Gonzales told ABC News. More than 70 million born in the U.S. since 9/11. More than 70 million people living in the United States, according to yearly birth data from the Centers of Disease Control and Prevention, had not yet been born on 9/11. Millions more, like Patricia Smith, were too young to comprehend the destruction and the metamorphosis that would follow. But some of those with vivid memories are still haunted by the epic intelligence failure that preceded the coordinated attacks. Others, who answered their country's patriotic call to hunt down those responsible in the alleged al-Qaeda safe haven of Afghanistan, now question if it was worth the sacrifice of more than 2,400 American soldiers. The War of Afghanistan spanned the administrations of 4 presidents and 8-year Iraq War, only to end last month with a chaotic withdrawal of American troops and the deaths of 13 more military service members, 4 born the same year as 9/11. The Taliban, which controlled Afghanistan in 2001 and provided safe haven to al-Qaeda, is back in power, renewing fears the country will once again become a base for terrorism. Lauren Crow was a student at Columbia University on 9/11, joined the Army after graduating in 2005, and served 2 tours in Afghanistan that garnered him 2 Purple Hearts, yet he said he understands why many who served in combat question if it was worth the pain they witnessed on both sides of the wire. He said he can only hope his fellow platoon members who didn't make it back alive did die for something greater, and that he tries to see positives through the bleak saga of Afghanistan. Some folks got an education that they might not have gotten. Some folks had access to health care that they might not have gotten. Was it worth it in the grand scheme of things? You know, who knows? Crow told ABC News. I think it's just desperately heartbreaking, and I think that more Americans should feel more shame about our lack of ability to provide a better future for them, the Afghans, over 20 years, Crow said. That's not any individual's fault. That's a large collective weight that I think probably we as a country need to carry. While it's been 10 years since Osama bin Laden, the founder of al-Qaeda, was gunned down by SEAL Team 6 in Abbottabad, Pakistan, no one has been convicted of helping him carry out the diabolical plot he masterminded, and only one has pleaded guilty and was sentenced to a life in prison. Justice delayed is justice denied, and now we are 20 years later with no justice, Patricia Smith told ABC News on a recent visit to memorial pools on the footprints of the Twin Towers, the 110-story buildings that took 7 years to construct and less than 2 years for terrorists to topple. Death rains from a crystal-clear sky. When Officer Maura Smith departed her home on that fateful Tuesday and headed to the 13th Precinct in Lower Manhattan, she kissed her 2-year-old daughter Patricia goodbye and left the toddler in the hands of her husband, Jim Smith, an officer working the night shift with the NYPD at the time. The father and daughter spent the morning watching Winnie the Pooh cartoons on a VCR, unaware of the attack commencing. Sorry about my nose. At 8:46 a.m., Smith heard a thunderous noise overhead, looked up into the clear blue sky, and saw a wide-body Boeing 767 swooping perilously close to the world's most famous skyline. American Airlines Flight 11 plowed into the North Tower of the World Trade Center, vanishing in a fireball between the 93rd and 99th floors. Smith is believed to be the first cop to radio in the catastrophic incident, the biggest salvo in the nation's never-ending war on terrorism. 17 minutes later, a hijacked United Airlines Flight 175 crashed into the South Tower. As the Twin Towers burned, a newspaper photographer snapped a shot of Smith leading a well-dressed man, his head bloodied, away from the disaster before she headed back to help others. Maura Smith's desperate last radio transmission came from inside the South Tower. "I don't have much air. Help me, please," she said, according to a recording of a dispatch. And that last transmission, you can definitely hear it that my mom was suffering, and I have to live with that, said Patricia Smith, a recent graduate of the University of Alabama, who works as an athletic trainer for the Tulane University football team in New Orleans. Get out of here. American Airlines Flight 77, a Boeing 757 aircraft, took off from Washington Dulles International Airport, headed for Los Angeles, when it, too, was hijacked. At 9:37 a.m., the once unthinkable happened. The aircraft slammed into the west wall of the Pentagon. United Airlines Flight 93 took off from Newark International Airport in New Jersey that morning, headed for San Francisco. According to a report from the National Transportation Safety Board, a team of 4 al-Qaeda terrorists stormed the cockpit at 9:32. The cockpit voice recorder indicated a struggle was occurring and captured the words of someone yelling, "Get out of here!" At an altitude of 41,000 feet, the plane suddenly changed course over northeast Ohio and began descending as it headed northeast or southeast. At least 13 passengers and crew members began calling loved ones on their cell phones and onboard GTE airphones, reporting that the flight had been hijacked by 4 men wearing red bandanas and wielding knives, that a flight attendant was killed and a passenger stabbed. According to the recordings, some of the passengers said they were formulating a plan to fight back. One passenger, Todd Beamer, was on the phone with a GTE airphone operator who heard him say, "Let's roll," just before the aircraft nosedived over Somerset County, Pennsylvania, and crashed into a field in Shanksville, about 80 miles southeast of Pittsburgh. Tom Ridge, who was then the governor of Pennsylvania and would be appointed the nation's first Secretary of Homeland Security in the aftermath of 9/11, told ABC News that he was certain the hijackers would have flown the plane into the nation's Capitol building had the passengers not intervened and stopped the attack. "Listen to the voicemails from the passengers. We know exactly what's going on," he said. America is under attack. Andy Card, then the Chief of Staff to President George W. Bush, was with the Commander-in-Chief that morning at Emma E. Booker Elementary School in Sarasota, Florida, to promote the White House's No Child Left Behind education program. Before entering a room of children, Card recalled a Navy captain approaching him and the president to say a small plane had crashed into the World Trade Center, an unfortunate tragic accident, they initially thought. After the president began reading to the second graders from the children's classic, The Pet Goat. That's kind of creepy to me. Okay, so he read The Pet Goat. The same Navy captain told Card a second plane had hit the World Trade Center's tower. Card said he immediately entered the room where the president was reading and whispered in his right ear, "America is under attack." Concerned about causing a panic, Bush remained in the classroom for several more minutes while the children continued to read, according to the 9/11 Commissioner report. On the way back to Washington, Card said he, Bush, and other West Wing staffers watched in horror on television as the South Tower of the World Trade Center, the second building struck, collapsed at 9:59 a.m. Eastern Time, followed 29 minutes later by the pancaking of the North Tower. The following day, Bush traveled to Lower Manhattan to see the destruction for himself. He stood atop a pile of smoldering rubble, his left arm draping the shoulder of a veteran firefighter, and began to speak into a bullhorn of the unspeakable loss. When someone in the group of rescuers and volunteer construction workers huddled around him shouted, "George, we can't hear ya," the president responded, "I can hear you. The rest of the world hears you, and the people who knock these buildings down will hear all of us soon enough." Clues missed. For 20 years, former FBI agents Kenneth Williams and Mark Rosini said they have spent countless sleepless nights wondering what if their warnings had been heeded. 2 months before the 9/11 attacks, Williams, then an agent at the FBI's bureau in Phoenix, wrote what became known as the Phoenix Memo to his superiors at the FBI headquarters that he had collected intelligence indicating that bin Laden and al-Qaeda were getting ready to do something in civil aviation in the United States, and associates of the terrorist network were attending flight schools in Arizona. "I wanted this information to be discussed with the broader intelligence community," Williams told ABC News. Williams' memo was never acted on because he suspects it did not include a specific threat or potential target. One of 10 suspected terrorists named in Williams' memo had close ties to Hani Hanjour, the hijacker who piloted Flight 77 into the Pentagon. "I held nobody accountable for not really taking any action on that document because, at the time period, FBI headquarters was looking at a real threat information that was coming in involving, for lack of a better description, ticking time bombs," Williams said. In March 2000, Rosini was on loan from the FBI's I-49 counterterrorism squad to the CIA's counterterrorism center at the agency's headquarters in Langley, Virginia. At work one morning, he read a cable from an informant saying 2 high-level al-Qaeda operatives had attended an al-Qaeda summit in Malaysia and entered the United States with valid visas on January 2000. Rosini told ABC News that he encouraged his colleague Doug Miller to draft a cable to FBI headquarters because the al-Qaeda operatives entered the U.S. amid nationwide alarm over the Millennium Plot, following the arrest of an al-Qaeda-trained operative with a car full of explosives in Washington state. However, CIA officials who had to approve any information shared with the FBI barred Miller from sending his cable to the FBI. The CIA has never publicly explained why it blocked Miller's document. The 2 al-Qaeda operatives were among the 19 September 11 hijackers. There was an enormous volume of intelligence shared with the FBI by the CIA, Rosini said, but why Miller's memo wasn't clear to send the Bureau remains a 9/11 related mystery. Numerous former officials from both agencies have told ABC News. This is my 20-year journey trying to figure out why. I've had basically a nervous breakdown over it. If you really want to know the truth, rattling my brain why something simply was not done, it defies logic. It defies reason. You shouldn't accept it, said Rosini, who resigned from the Bureau in 2008 when he pleaded guilty to misdemeanor charges of accessing records in an FBI database. He was sentenced to a year of probation, ordered to perform 250 hours of community service, and pay a $5,000 fine. All right, so there is more in this article, but we do have to go to our first musical break. On this break, we have Miss Michaela Hay from Toronto, Canada, as well as Mr. Fred Johnson III from Canyon County, California. You guys don't go anywhere. We'll be right back after this musical break.
There's too much sky too blue, too white. The birds on the wire are singing, but I don't know why. Why aren't the roses hanging their heads? They're standing straight up, blooming instead. Now that we're apart, there's nothing but blood in my heart. Why does that guy have a smile on his face? Why is the sun even shining today? Why are the headlines talking about love? Don't they all know what happened to us? Now that we're apart, there's nothing but blood in my heart. The moon goes up, the sun goes down, the stars light up, the world goes round. Every day, life moves on, it don't stop for anyone. The moon goes up, the sun goes down, the stars light up, the world goes round. Every day, life moves on, it don't stop for anyone. Now that we're apart, there's nothing. Now that we're apart, there's nothing but blood in my heart. Blood in my heart. Blood in my heart. Saw you for the first time in a while, in a while. You seemed so surprised I worked out a smile, out a smile, out a smile. 'Cause I've grown and I've changed, yeah, we went separate ways. How come we're both back here? 'Cause you pushed me away, had my life rearranged, but still we're both back here. Close to me, I want you close to me. I can see that you wanted me.
I decided, because we're kind of short on time and a lot of these things are taking up an enormous amount of time, that I'm going to skip Mr. Fred Johnson III. Sorry, Fred Johnson. I love you to death. You're one of my favorite artists, but I feel that this is more important. So, finishing up on this article from ABC News, living casualties of the longest day in the history of days. Among the voices emerging over the past 2 decades are ones of anger and distrust in the government over alleged secrets it refuses to disclose. Still others, who race to the ruins of the World Trade Center hoping to find survivors, continue to suffer and die from toxic air government leaders insisted at the time was safe to breathe. 9/11 is the longest day in the history of days, said construction worker John Field, one of the hundreds of volunteers who rushed to the World Trade Center to victims to search for them. It just has not ended for those that lost loved ones that day, for those who got sick and are still sick, for those who got sick and died. Field was severely injured during the search and rescue operation when 8,000 pounds of steel landed on his foot. He founded the Feel Good Foundation, a non-profit that advocates for New York first responders suffering from a host of ailments traced to 9/11, including lung disease, gastroesophageal reflux disease, GERD, cancer, post-traumatic stress disorder, pulmonary disease, and depression. He also lobbied Congress to extend compensation for them, even when some elected leaders no longer saw a need to. I'll be 55 in November. I was 34 when I got hurt. It's almost half my life, Phil told ABC News. I wake up every morning and I'm reminded by looking at half a foot. I guess time has evaded me because it feels like yesterday in so many ways. Other living casualties of 9/11 are people like Brett Eagleson, who was 15 when his father Bruce was killed at the World Trade Center. Eagleson has spent years trying to get the federal government to make public what the FBI has learned about the roles top officials of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia may have played in the attacks. A lawsuit he and other survivors of 9/11 victims filed against Saudi Arabia contends it was more than a coincidence that 15 of the 19 hijackers were from Saudi Arabia. The 9/11 Commission report, completed in December 2004, found no evidence that Saudi Arabia government as an institution or senior Saudi officials individually funded the al-Qaeda hijackers. The Saudi kingdom has denied accusations it was complicit in the 9/11 attacks. If there were Saudi officials who, in their spare time, were working with elements of al-Qaeda, that would not surprise me at all, former New Jersey Attorney General John Farmer, who served as senior counsel to the 9/11 Commission, told ABC News. Leon Panetta, who served as Secretary of Defense and CIA Director in the Obama administration, added, "Just as our country made mistakes in the judgments we made about 9/11, I think the leaders in Saudi Arabia made some of the same mistakes." But the plaintiffs, whose case is pending, claim that since the Commission's report was released, the FBI has continued to investigate whether the Saudi government was involved in 9/11 but has refused to declassify evidence the family suspect show the kingdom was complicit. Last month, the Department of Justice announced that the FBI had recently closed a portion of its investigation into the attacks and is reviewing some long classified documents to determine if they can now be disclosed. And last week, President Joe Biden signed an executive order directing the disclassification of certain 9/11 related documents to be released over the next 6 months. The further and further we get away from 9/11, the easier it is to forget what really happened that day, and the easier it is to forget about the truth, said Eagleson, whose father worked for the Westfield Group, which managed the mall at the World Trade Center. The remains of Eagleson's father and those more than 1,100 victims of the attack in the Lower Manhattan have never been recovered. That added to the pain and misery, Eagleson told ABC News. My family, along with many other families, are still waiting on remains to be found. They destroyed my life. Just 45 days after September 11th attacks, as the White House feared a follow-up ambush was imminent, Congress passed the Patriot Act, expanding the government's domestic surveillance powers to include reviewing bank records and even library records. The act also allowed the National Security Agency to execute warrantless searches of American citizens' phone calls and emails. Subsequent lawsuits and whistleblowers, such as Edward Snowden, a former computer intelligence consultant for the National Security Agency, revealed abuses of the act, including that the Bush and Obama administrations had secretly acquired in bulk the phone data of millions of innocent U.S. citizens without a warrant. In the aftermath of 9/11, it also came to light that the U.S. government had allegedly kidnapped, detained, and tortured numerous prisoners without even charging them, including some of the more than 800 detainees sent to Guantanamo Bay Detention Camp, an American military prison in Cuba outside U.S. legal jurisdiction that remains in operation. Everybody who knows about Guantanamo Bay, I think today, would be surprised at some of the things that went on there. Marion Spike Bowman, the former Deputy General Counsel for National Security at the FBI, told ABC News. Lakhdar Boumediene, an Algerian-born citizen, has held for 7 years and 6 months at Guantanamo Bay, where he said he was relentlessly interrogated and routinely tortured. The U.S. government has denied allegations of prisoners being tortured at Guantanamo Bay. Yeah. They destroyed my health. They destroyed my life, Boumediene told ABC News. Boumediene said that he was living in Sarajevo, Bosnia, and worked as an aide at a boarding school for orphans at the Balkan conflicts of the 1990s. I had a good life with my wife and children. I had a good job, he said, and yet my life had turned 180 degrees. Following the September 11th attacks, Boumediene was arrested in a sweep of men associated with an Algerian charity worker authorities suspected was plotting to bomb the U.S. Embassy in Bosnia. When a judge ordered Boumediene released in 2002 for lack of evidence, he said he was inexplicably turned over to the U.S. military and sent to Guantanamo. They destroyed everything, but until now, I still didn't get anything. No compensation, no apologies. 20 years later, I can't find the truth behind the imprisonment at Guantanamo, Boumediene said. Boumediene became the lead plaintiff in a federal law by detainees accusing the Bush administration of denying them the right of habeas corpus, or the ability to challenge their detentions before a natural judge, in violation of the Constitution. The U.S. Supreme Court, in a narrow 5-4 decision, sided with the detainees in June 2008. Bush said he would abide by the High Court's decision, but that doesn't mean I have to agree with it, he said, strongly concurring with the dissenting justices, including late conservative Justice Antonin Scalia, who wrote that the decision would make the war on terror harder and that it will almost certainly cause more Americans to be killed. 4 months after the ruling, Boumediene was released to France when federal judge Richard Leon, a Bush appointee, ruled the Bush administration relied on insufficient evidence to imprison him and others deemed enemy combatants. From September 11th to January 6th, lessons unlearned. Panetta was the Secretary of Defense when bin Laden was killed on May 2, 2011. He recalled the relief that swept through the White House Situation Room and the chants of USA, USA, CIA, CIA coming from a crowd gathered across the street in Lafayette Park. I think we had sent a message to the world that nobody attacks the United States and gets away with it, Panetta told the ABC News. But a decade after bin Laden's death, America remains under the constant threat of terrorist groups that have metastasized around the world and, according to Panetta, without a comprehensive strategy to defeat terrorism in the world. I mean, you fight a war, you have an enemy, you go after that enemy, you defeat that enemy, and that's it, Panetta said. In this instant, you're fighting essentially a guerrilla war in these countries with terrorists who are all over the place. He said following 9/11, the U.S. had a clear mission to dismantle al-Qaeda and kill bin Laden. I think today that memory has faded, Panetta said. We're focused on other issues, health. We're now focused on China and Russia. I think it is very important for those responsible for protecting our country to never just go with the times, but to always ask the question, what are the potential threats that are out there? Tom Ridge, the former Secretary of Homeland Security, said the January 6th insurrection at the Capitol building, which caught police off guard, was an indication that some of the lessons learned from the intelligence breakdown of 9/11 have been forgotten. Are we going back to pre-9/11 complacency? Ridge asked. A former Republican governor and congressman, Ridge said the attack on the Capitol by American citizens was shameful. But the fact is that Americans assaulted the Capitol when 20 years before Americans died, so terrorists couldn't assault the Capitol, Ridge said. If it isn't enough to make the hair on the back of your neck stand straight up, well, at least it does mine. And I do believe that all of us do feel a little differently about things going on than others do. We were all raised differently and we learn different ways. So the next thing that I wanted to play for you guys are the voices from the air, recordings from passengers on board.
Taxi 2, runway United 175, heavy runway 9er, cleared for takeoff. American 77, your departure frequency will be 125.
September the 11th, 2001. Voices crackle over the airwaves as terrorists seize control of the skies. This is the story of 9/11, told by newly released audio recordings made that day that reveal the chaos behind the true events of 9/11.
Our number one staff, our first class galley flight attendant, and our pursers and staff.
We may have a hijack. We have some problems over here right now.
I'm on a plane that's been hijacked. I hope to be able to see your face again, baby. I love you.
Another one just hit the building. Wow. Another one just hit the World Trade. American 11 Heavy, Boss Tower, Taxi 2, runway 48 via Bravo, and monitor the tower 118.1. USA 1995.
On the morning of September the 11th, 2001, air traffic controllers in Boston start another busy day.
US Air 1995, cleared for takeoff. Departure is 1995 departure.
We basically guide aircraft from one end of the country to the other end of the country. They do use airways, and airways are just like roadways. So it's really not much difference.
Rochester 1995, plan to maintain 14,000. Top of 14,000.
We have a first morning push in the morning. You know, it starts roughly 6:30 to 7, kind of like rush hour in any other big city. And we say safe and efficient because everyone can't go direct. Everyone came direct. Everyone meet at the same point. But we want to be as efficient as possible, so we try to get as many aircraft on the way as quickly as we can.
American 11 cleared for takeoff. Wind 330 at 9er.
At the height of the morning rush hour, American Airlines Flight 11 departs Boston headed to Los Angeles. All communications are routinely recorded.
American 11 Boston, center of climbing, Timberwood 280. American 11 turn 20 degrees right. Likely manage you loud clear.
But 13 minutes into the flight, Controller Peter Zalewski loses contact with the cockpit.
American 11, climbing table level 350. American 11, Boston.
Silence is real scary for a controller. We develop a three-dimensional picture in our head telling us what we have, and we know where everybody is. And if you ever lose that picture, that's a very, very scary feeling. You get a pit in your stomach.
American 11, if you hear Boston Center, ident please or acknowledge.
The biggest thing you need on an airplane to work is their radios. If you don't have their radios, you have no control.
We had lost radio contact with them, and then we almost simultaneously lost their transponder.
Looks like it's turning right.
Pretty much makes your plane kind of invisible. Trying to identify that aircraft to other people now becomes more difficult.
He will not respond to me now. He won't answer you. Here's Nardo. Roger. Thank you. United 175 Heavy, runway 9er, cleared for takeoff. Cleared for takeoff, runway 9er, United 175 Heavy.
As concerns grow over American 11, Boston Air Traffic Control has dozens of other scheduled flights to deal with. Among them is United Airlines 175, also headed for Los Angeles.
Runway 4 right. United 175 Heavy, cleared out of 1200. United 175 Heavy, Boston departure radar contact. Climb and maintain 14,000. 14,000, United 175 Heavy.
While United 175 sets course for LA, a voice from the air is about to reveal the chaos unfolding on board American 11. From the back of the aircraft, flight attendant Betty Ong calls an American Airlines operator on the ground.
Hello, my name is Betty Ong. I'm number 3 in the back. The cockpit's not answering. Somebody stabbed in business class. And I think there's mates that we can't breathe. I don't know. I think we're getting hijacked.
Which flight is you on?
I'm number 3 on flight 11.
Okay, you're the flight attendant?
Yes. And the cockpit is not answering their phone.
American 11 has been hijacked by 5 men, and they have stormed their way into the cockpit.
Our number 1 got stabbed. Our first class galley flight attendant and our purser has been stabbed. And we can't get into the cockpit. The door won't open.
I think Betty sounds very much in control. I just can't imagine what it would have been like to be inside the aircraft, not knowing what was going to happen.
Can anybody get up to the cockpit? I think the guys are up there. They might have found their way up there or something. Nobody can call the cockpit. We can't even get inside.
The supervisor keeps Betty on the line and calls an emergency number to report the hijack.
American Airlines emergency line, please state your emergency.
Hey, this is Nitty at American Airlines calling. I am monitoring a call in which Flight 11, the flight attendant is advising our reps that the pilot, everyone's been stabbed.
Flight 11?
Yep. They can't get into the cockpit is what I'm hearing.
Okay,
I've got the flight attendant on the line with one of our agents.
Okay.
Okay, I'm still on with security, okay, Betty? You're doing a great job. Just stay calm, okay?
Okay, we're contacting the flight crew now. We're also contacting ATC.
Okay. They are in the cockpit with the pilot.
The hijackers now have control of American 11 and are flying the aircraft themselves. They turn south, deviating from its flight plan. In an attempt to calm the passengers, lead hijacker Mohammed Atta accidentally broadcasts over the airwaves.
We have some planes. Just stay quiet and you'll be okay. We're turning to the airport. American 11, are you trying to call? Nobody move. Everything will be okay. If you try to make any move, you'll injure yourself and the airplane. Just stay quiet.
The supervisor came in and said, We think we just heard something on the frequency. It sounded like threats, and he believed the aircraft was hijacked.
It was like, whoa, was something really going on here.
The hijackers continue to fly American 11 south. In Herndon, Virginia, at the command center of the Federal Aviation Administration, news of the hijack still hasn't broken. With overriding control of the skies above America, they will need to coordinate any response. Starting his first day in charge of the operations floor is Ben Sliney.
The day was brilliant. It was absolutely clear, no wind problems. There was no weather at all from Maine to Florida. And I said to myself, well, that's going to be a real easy first day. I had prepared myself for a briefing to be given at 8:30, and the supervisor called up to me to say that there was a possible hijacking out of Boston. The possibility of a hijacking is not something that the air traffic system is unfamiliar with. And there are protocols, and I was quite comfortable that my staff and all the air traffic controllers knew those protocols quite well. And I told the supervisor to keep me informed.
With Boston Air Traffic Control taking the lead, information about American 11 is passed on quickly to the surrounding control centers. But the problem is, nobody knows where the aircraft is headed.
Actually, in New York, Boston, I got a little situation with American 1-1 and American 11. We don't know where the aircraft is going, and we lost this transponder, and now the aircraft is heading due south. Oh, my goodness. You have no idea where he's going? No idea, sir. Okay. Okay. Thank you.
We're used to being in control. You tell an aircraft to do something, they do it. You climb, you descend, you turn, you see it on the radar, it's done. In this case, we had no control. We had no idea what this guy was going to do.
Flying off course and at great speed, the hijacked American 11 sets a new route. Destination, New York City. As the hijacked American 11 continues on its new flight path, at the Federal Aviation Administration's command center, Ben Sliney is informed of a stabbing on board the aircraft.
This was a radical departure from anything I was experienced with. American 11 had made a left descending turn to the south. So the aircraft, we figured, may have been trying to go to New York.
The terrorists are now only 100 miles from their target. Hijacker Mohammed Atta tries to reassure the passengers on board they will be safe.
Nobody move, please. Going back to the airport. Don't try to make any stupid moves.
At the time of 9/11, the defense of the northeast coast of America was in the hands of NEADS, the Northeast Air Defense Sector. In charge that day is Colonel Bob Marr, who's preparing for a military exercise, codename Vigilant Guardian.
On September 11th, we were beginning an exercise. It was going to be a week-long type war game where nobody was going to get hurt, and it gave you the opportunity to make mistakes and have them pointed out. So it wasn't going to be an easy week by any means, but it was a simulation.
As NEADS waits for the war game to begin, in Boston Air Traffic Control, the hijack of American 11 is escalating.
American 11, if you hear Boston Center, ident, please, or acknowledge.
Controller Joseph Cooper is told by his supervisor to break protocol and call the military directly to ask for help.
We had noticed the aircraft had turned south, and it actually increased in speed. It was going faster for some reason. I called NEADS to advise them that we had a hijack. It was confirmed.
Roger, weapons, Sergeant Powell. All right, Boston Center, Team U. We have a problem here. We have a hijacked aircraft headed towards New York, and we need you guys to scramble some F-16s or something up there to help us out.
Is this real world or exercise?
No, this is not an exercise, not a test.
When I gave him that information, it appeared he didn't believe me because he asked me if it was real time or not. At this point, I'm like, yes, it's, and this guy's moving fast. and he's headed southbound, and we have no idea what he's doing. Just help us somehow, some way.
Hey.
He handed me off to someone else. I assume it was his superior.
Hi, this is Major Destin.
Joe Cooper, Boston Center. We have a hijacked aircraft headed towards the New York metro area. Wondering if you could send someone up there, send F-16s or something.
Okay.
Maybe out of Otis.
Okay.
But confusion begins because air traffic control and the military talk in different technical jargons and don't understand each other.
Hold on a second.
Do you have a mode 3 on it?
No,
Do you have a mode 3 code?
it's just the primary target only. We lost the mode C on it.
I felt panicked. My heart was pounding, and I just, I was just hoping for someone to help us out.
News of the hijacking of American 11 filters through to the floor of NIAD's control room. The military personnel are unprepared.
What? Is that real world? Cool. Real? Where is it? Boston?
To find out more about the hijack, an identification technician calls Boston Air Traffic Control. Colin Scoggins answers the call.
Yeah, Hunter's calling in reference to the hijacked aircraft.
Yes.
We need call sign type aircraft.
It's American 11. Type aircraft is a 767.
Do you have a mode 3?
No, we don't. He's a primary target only.
Primary target only?
Yeah.
At that time, I kept telling him it was a primary target, but during that time period between the military and the FAA, that term probably had two different meanings. So they still want to know what the code is, and I'm trying to explain to them that there is no code, and that they need to pick up this primary target.
He took off out of Boston, originally heading for Los Angeles.
Where are they going now? Do you know?
We don't know.
You don't know where he is at all?
We don't know. We don't know where he's going. He's 35 miles north of Kennedy now at 367 knots.
Okay.
We'll call you right back as soon as we know more info.
Thank you.
Okay.
A lot of frustration because we've been trying to tell them where the aircraft was, and they just couldn't identify it.
As the technicians struggle to locate American 11, Colonel Bob Marr mobilizes the military's first air defense response.
My first call then was, we need to put these guys on battle stations. What battle stations does is puts the pilots in the cockpit.
NIADS has 2 Air Force bases on the East Coast, with fighter jets at their immediate disposal. The closest to American 11's flight path is Otis Air Base, Cape Cod, 190 miles from New York City. On the NIAD's control room floor, Mission Crew Commander Nasipany and Senior Weapons Director Fox prepare to get the fighter jets airborne.
Find this guy. Mode 3, 1443. It's the last known position that we got out of this guy. It was right there at the Z point. He's heading 190 at 29,000 feet. This is real world. Okay, running the hijack that we got out of this guy.
Now you're in this period of trying to get fighters in the air, trying to locate the track of interest, the hijacked aircraft, get the fighters pointing in the right direction.
But American 11 is now just minutes away from New York City, and descending fast. On board the aircraft, Flight Attendant Betty Yong has been struggling to tell ground staff what's going on.
Okay, the aircraft is erratic again. Very erratically. What's going on your end, Tech?
They have him on a primary radar. They seem to think that he is descending.
Okay. What's going on, Betty? Betty, talk to me. Betty, are you there? Betty? I think we might have lost her.
Moments after communication with American 11 is lost,
All right, here we go.
NIADS is still trying to get fighters in the air.
I don't know where I'm scrambling these guys to. I need a direction, destination. Okay, I'm going to give you the Z point. It's just north of New York City. Head them in that direction. Copy that.
Finally, the fighters are scrambled.
This is Huntress with an active air defense scramble for Tampa 4546. Scramble immediately.
But the jets are held on the tarmac, while the military continues to try and work out the exact coordinates to send them to. Just 40 seconds after the scramble order is given, Mohammed Atta flies American 11 into the North Tower of the World Trade Center. Confusion hits the airwaves of surrounding air traffic control centers as reports that the signal for American 11 has disappeared from radar.
Looks like we lost the primary target about 20 west of Kennedy. Yeah, we lost the track too. Yeah, New York confirms we've lost the track as well. Are you serious? Kennedy Tower reports that there was fire at the World Trade Center. And that's the area where we lost the airplane.
Soon after the impact, news reports hit the airwaves speculating what may have happened.
We understand that there has been a plane crash on the southern tip of Manhattan. You're looking at the World Trade Center. We understand that a plane has crashed into the World Trade Center. We don't know anything more than that. We don't know if it was a commercial aircraft. We don't know if it was a private aircraft. We have no idea.
In the air, other pilots above New York are confused by what they are seeing.
Anybody know what that smoke is? A lot of smoke in lower Manhattan. A lot of smoke in lower Manhattan? Out of the top of the World Trade Center building, the major fire.
Everyone was just like in shock and disbelief. It's like you couldn't even think straight. It's like, oh my God, the worst thing for air traffic. You trained your whole life. Number one, safety. Keep them separated, keep them safe. So we just lost. And that was the feeling you had. You lost.
You didn't.
Chaos has come to the heart of New York, but the terror has only just begun. As reports of a small aircraft impacting the World Trade Center circulate the airwaves, at the Federal Aviation Administration's command center, reality is dawning.
I knew, and anyone in air traffic control and aviation knew, that that was no small aircraft that had struck the World Trade Center. I had a very bad feeling when I saw the size of the fire and smoke and obviously something huge had hit that building.
At the Northeast Air Defense Sector, news of the crash also breaks.
This is what I got. Hospital news that 737 just hit the World Trade Center. This is real world. And we're trying to confirm this.
Oh my God. Oh God.
We had a report that a light aircraft had hit the World Trade Center. We had a report that landing gear off an aircraft had hit the World Trade Center. I think there was even a call that a commuter aircraft had hit the World Trade Center.
Last I knew, they had a primary on it.
The worst possible situation in my mind at the time was that there had been some terrible accident.
We can do what we got to do, okay?
Without confirmation that American 11 is involved in the crash, the military maintains its objective.
The mission had not changed. There was no guarantee that the hijacking was over, and so fighters are still getting out there.
Send them to New York City, still continue to go.
Air defense fighters finally take to the skies, 7 minutes after American 11 impacts the North Tower.
Make sure that the FAA clears your route all the way through. Do what we got to do.
They are a step behind the hijackers. 147 miles from Otis Air Base is New York Air Traffic Control Center, which handles one of the busiest airspaces in the world. Controller Dave Batiglia has 19 years of experience working these routes, and he's about to be caught in the middle of the second phase of the terrorist attack.
United 175, clear direct spotter.
United Airlines Flight 175, which departed Boston 15 minutes after American 11, suddenly changes its transponder code.
United 175, recycle your transponder and score code of 1470. United 175, New York. United 175, do you read New York?
United 175 originally was talking to me, and now he's gone. But then what happens is the code changes. And I'm still not as concerned until I started to watch them make a climb, a very fast rate of climb without any control instruction.
United 175, do you read New York? United 175, do you read New York?
At that point, I got a little scared. Because now things are starting to, you know how you put two and two together? And I'm starting to think, well, American 11 got hijacked. United's out of Boston also.
Fearing the worst, Batiglia calls a colleague.
Hello, do me a favor, you see that target there, the 3321 code at 335 climbing? We have a hijack. We have some problems over here right now. Oh, you do? Yes. And okay. That may be real traffic. Nobody knows. I can't get a hold of United 175 at all right now. And I don't know where he went to. All right. Okay.
As soon as I finish the call, I turn to the facility chief and says, I think I have another hijack.
On board United 175, desperate passengers try to call their loved ones. Brian Sweeney leaves a message for his wife, Julie.
Jules, this is Brian. Listen, on an airplane that's been hijacked, and things will go well. I'm good to go. I just want you to know I absolutely love you. I want you to do good. So happy to time. Same to my parents and everybody. And I just totally love you. And I'll see you later. Bye, Dave.
He was saying goodbye, and I remember when he said, I'll see you when you get here. Here to him was where he was going, and in his belief, you meet up with everybody once you get there. So he said goodbye, and he told me to live my life and be happy and move on, move forward, and I knew he was gone then. I knew it.
That's true love.
Now on course for New York City, United Airlines Flight 175 is just minutes away from impact. Just 4 minutes after New York Center loses contact with United Airlines 175, the terrorist attack is evolving fast.
United 175, do you read New York?
The next phase is about to begin. At Indianapolis Air Traffic Control, a third aircraft, American Airlines Flight 77, en route from Washington to Los Angeles, also stops responding.
American 77, Indy. American 77, Indy. American 77, American, Indy.
Sometimes the guy will flick the switch by accident. Then you see him turn. You know, that's not good.
American 77, Indy radio check. How do you read?
You're thinking, oh my gosh, he has an emergency. Once you realize there's a problem and a guy's losing control of the airplane, that's a very difficult thing to, because you can't do anything. You can't do anything.
As American Airlines Flight 77 deviates from its flight plan, in New York, concern grows amongst controllers as United 175 begins a fast descent into the heart of the city.
Hello. Hey, Joe, you see 3321 code just southwest of Newark by about 15, 18, 20 miles. 15,000 descending. They were tracking him, made a hard left turn. He's descending pretty rapidly, especially what just happened in there. This guy's a big boy because he's leading some big contrails. Do you know who he is?
We don't know who he is. We're just picking him up now.
All right, heads up, man. It looks like another one.
All right.
Sept 175 was descending at an extremely rapid rate of descent, something I've never, ever seen that fast a rate of descent. Normally they would descend at 1,500 feet a minute. This airplane was going down every 12 and a half seconds, 2,000 feet.
Holy shit.
That's a tremendous rate of descent.
Can you look out your window right now? Yeah. Can you see God about 4,000 feet, about 5 east of the airport right now? Yeah, I can. Is he descending for the building also? He's descending really quick too, yeah. Well, that's 2,500 feet now. He just dropped 800 feet in like one sweep.
Holy shit. Oh my god.
Another one just hit the building. Wow. Another one hit it hard. Another one just hit the world face. The whole building just came apart. Holy smokes.
9:03 a.m.
Everybody was in shock. You're watching something on a radar scope, and you see the target disappear. Now somebody comes in and yells, "An airplane just hit the Trade Center." Now, both of those together paints a picture in your mind that you'll never forget. We didn't actually see the crash, but we watched everything happen unfold on the scope.
When United 175 struck that building, there was a collective gasp in that room. It was just all the air had gone out of that room. And it was the most horrifying thing that I could ever imagine seeing. A air carrier loaded, as far as I knew, with hundreds of people crashing into that building and that jet fuel exploding.
The image of that plane.
Holy shit. I just saw a UFO.
Will be ingrained in everybody's memory for
Julie
the
Sweeney.
rest of their lives. The bottom line is you are watching the last seconds of your loved one's life alive, and then you watch them die.
I remember watching on the screen that second tower get hit. And that, for me, really was the tipping point. That no longer meant there was a terrible accident, which was the worst that we could think of before. Now this is definitely a terrorist attack. That meant that New York City was under attack.
Colonel Bob Marr.
And that we needed to protect New York City.
Okay, we need to talk to FAA. We need to tell them if this stuff is going to keep on going, we need to take those fighters, put them over Manhattan. If there's more out there, which we don't know, let's get them over Manhattan. At least we got some kind of play.
But despite air defense jets being 12 minutes outside of New York, they are heading to the wrong city. Next on the terrorist plan of attack is the nation's capital. Amidst the speed of the terrorist attacks, confusion now hits the airwaves. In Boston Center, Colin Scoggins receives a conflicting report about the first plane that hit the towers.
I heard a report that American 11 was still airborne. So I immediately called Northeast Air Defense Command there in NEADS and advised them that American 11 was still in the air.
Military Boston Center.
9:21 a.m.
American 11 is still in the air. It's heading towards Washington.
American 11 is still in the air on its way towards Washington?
It was definitely another aircraft that hit the tower. That's the latest report we have.
So American 11 isn't the hijack at all then, right?
No, he is a hijack.
American 11 is a hijack?
Yes.
And he's going into Washington?
Could be a third aircraft.
Things just never stopped. They just kept rolling. And there was obviously confusion because it wasn't correct.
Okay, American Airlines is still airborne. 11, the first guy, he's heading towards Washington. I'm going to take the fighters from Otis and try to chase this guy down if I can find him.
At that moment, we felt like we had no control of any airspace. We didn't know what was going on with aircraft right and left.
Is it not just New York and Washington? Is it possibly Detroit? Is it possibly Chicago? What's the next point? How many of these are there out there? And we don't know.
Things just morphed after that. They just kind of exploded.
Well, on that note, you guys, we do have to go to our second music break. And on this break, we have Miss McKaylin Hay. And she is from Ontario, Canada. She will be singing Gravity. Pins and Needles and Mirror. Then we also have Mr. Fred Johnson III from Canyon County, California with After Dark. You guys don't go anywhere. We'll be right back after this musical break.
Signs leave behind for you to find. Hoping that you'll notice lights and purple skies were like satellites moving into focus. Into focus. Into focus. Silent, drifting all alone, killing time and counting stars, waiting for the moment we collide. I feel you pull me closer, you got me burning up, you got a hold on me. I feel you pull me closer, you got me burning up, you're my gravity. Shining in the dark, we chase the spark, search until we find it. We were worlds apart, now connecting hearts. They look up to find us. Look up to find us. Silent, drifting all alone, killing time and counting stars, waiting for the moment we collide. I feel you pull me closer, you got me burning up, you got a hold on me. I feel you pull me closer, you got me burning up, you're my gravity. Silent, drifting all alone, killing time and counting stars, waiting for the moment we collide. I feel you pull me closer, you got me burning up, you got a hold on me. I feel you pull me closer, you got me burning up, you're my gravity. I feel you pull me closer, you got me burning up, you got a hold on me. I feel you pull me closer, you got me burning up, you're my gravity. Talking on pins and needles, every word through a microscope. You keep stomping down on the ground while I've been stuck on this tightrope. I just wanna say what I wanna say without your sentence. I'm not willing to do the time when I'm innocent, and I'm innocent. Talking on pins and needles. Talking on pins and needles. I'm gonna hang it up, hang it up, hang it up. And I'm done, and I'm done, and I'm done, done, done. I'm gonna hang it up, hang it up, hang it up. And I'm done, and I'm done, and I'm done, done, done. I'm gonna hang it up, hang it up, crash at my feet. You won't ever see me beg, so take this tongue off your leash. I'm gonna say what I wanna say, don't need permission. Interpret it how you want, it's my decision. Talking on pins and needles. Talking on pins and needles. I'm gonna hang it up, hang it up, hang it up. And I'm done, and I'm done, and I'm done, done, done. I'm gonna hang it up, hang it up, hang it up. And I'm done, and I'm done, and I'm done, done, done. I'm gonna hang it up, hang it up, hang it up. And I'm done, and I'm done, and I'm done, done, done. I'm gonna hang it up, hang it up, hang it up. And I'm done, and I'm done, and I'm done, done, done. Dancing on shattered glass, kicking the pieces all around. My safety has been broken, this is now a hunting ground. Talking on pins and needles. Talking on pins and needles. I'm gonna hang it up, hang it up, hang it up. And I'm done, and I'm done, and I'm done, done, done. I'm gonna hang it up, hang it up, hang it up. And I'm done, and I'm done, and I'm done, done, done. I'm gonna hang it up, hang it up, hang it up. And I'm done, and I'm done, and I'm done, done, done. I'm gonna hang it up, hang it up, hang it up. And I'm done, and I'm done, and I'm done, done, done. I'm gonna hang it up, I'm gonna hang it up, I'm gonna hang it up, up, up. Talking about, I'm gonna hang it up, I'm gonna hang it up, I'm gonna hang it up, up, up. Talking about, I'm gonna hang it up, I'm gonna hang it up, I'm gonna hang it up, up, up. Talking about, I'm gonna hang it up, I'm gonna hang it up, I'm gonna hang it up, 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 up. I dove right in. Didn't bring a parachute, fell right through, hit the water hard. Moving too fast, spiraling out of control, was touch and go, went a little far. You taught me how to turn a blind eye. I showed you how to keep a shoulder cold. No one walked away without a scar, scar, scar. I've been digging through the pieces. Your heart is out of reach, but objects may seem nearer through this rippled mirror. I've been digging through the pieces. Your heart is out of reach, but objects may seem nearer through this rippled mirror. Try to erase the ink that's left upon my chest. I'll attest, I don't really wanna forget to forget. You taught me how to turn a blind eye. I showed you how to keep a shoulder cold. No one walked away without a scar, scar, scar. I've been digging through the pieces. Your heart is out of reach, but objects may seem nearer through this rippled mirror. I've been digging through the pieces. Your heart is out of reach, but objects may seem nearer through this rippled mirror. You taught me how to turn a blind eye. I showed you how to keep a shoulder cold. No one walked away without a scar, scar, scar. I've been digging through the pieces. Your heart is out of reach, but objects may seem nearer through
guess I don't know why I can't control this absurd again, yeah. Living at the dark, I search lonely streets to find hidden shadows in the dark. It doesn't matter what I say, change the things that murder forever after. No matter what I say, after dark. Feeling ran to arguments and fear. Behind a place with days under slumber. Concerning works or in romantic. It doesn't matter what I say. It really doesn't. No matter what I say. After dark. It doesn't matter what I say. Secret homicides arranging a series of pursuits. No matter what I say. Change in the stuff. Murder forever after. It doesn't matter what I say. Rude and fatal, lacking the hint of conscience. No matter what I say. After dark.
Welcome back, and thank you so much for joining us tonight on We Are Paradox Media's Late Night in the Rockies. So glad you guys joined us this evening for the 20th anniversary of 9/11 and the remembrance of such. So, we're going to finish this video, which I will be posting on We Are Paradox Media's Facebook page, as well as Twitter. I'm going to try to get it on Discord and other outlets that we're on. But also the after party, if you guys are in there. Skywatcher was saying he's never heard this video before or seen it, so he was hoping that I'd share it, which I will. I'll share everything that I did read or partake from this evening to give it credit, because I like to give credit where credit is due. But let's finish up this video, and we will move on to Voices of 9/11 once more.
Scramble Langley, head towards the Washington area.
NEAD scrambles Langley Air Force Base in Hampton, Virginia, 128 miles from Washington, D.C. Estimated flight time to the capital, 15 minutes. With 2 hijacked aircraft down, an American 77 unaccounted for, a 4th and final aircraft is about to complete the terrorist plan of attack.
United 93, New York Center, good morning.
United 93 had taken off out of Newark International, but 46 minutes into the flight, controllers in Cleveland hear the actual moment hijackers storm the cockpit.
Somebody call Cleveland. United 93, verify 350. We hear some funny noises. We're trying to get him. Do you have him? No. United 93, Cleveland. United 1523, did you hear screaming?
Yes, I did, and we couldn't tell what it was either. I got some pieces down. Keep remaining steady. We have the ball boat.
Fearing the worst, the Cleveland controllers act quickly, clearing all aircraft out of United 93's way.
Aircraft we believe was transmitting as 12 o'clock, flying 5 miles, turn left heading 225. I'll get you away from him. 16 Mike Foxtrot, fly heading 120. Get you away from that. Going 120 on heading, Mike Fox. He's climbing, so I want to keep everybody away from him.
United 93 continues to climb erratically. In Washington, controllers are still anxiously trying to track the third hijacked aircraft, American 77, which has entered their airspace.
I see him on the radar. I was like, wow, who is this guy? What's he doing? What's going on? I get over to my supervisor, Vic. He picks up the phone right away.
Hunter's ID, unsecure line.
Hunter's ID, this is Winston, the operations manager. Okay, we're looking. We're also lost American 77. He was going to LA also.
He was also LA.
Indianapolis Center was working this guy. They lost radar with him. They lost contact with him. They lost everything, and they don't have any idea what happened.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks.
In Boston, Colin Scoggins has learned an unidentified aircraft is closing in on the nation's capital. He's unaware it's American 77.
Call came over the Telcon stating that there was an aircraft 6 miles southwest of the White House. And I called NEADS up.
Latest report, the aircraft flying 6 miles southeast of the White House.
6 miles southeast of the White House?
It was tough, because at that point, he's going to hit something. The grasp, the reality is this airplane is going to run into the White House.
Pretty sure the president was in the air.
Suddenly changes direction.
Aircraft is moving away.
Moving away from the White House.
Yeah, 6 southwest of the White House, deviating away.
Deviating away. You don't have a type aircraft, so you don't know who he is.
Nothing. We're in Boston, so I have no clue. It was a very helpless feeling. And my supervisor yelled, anybody got a military? Anybody got a military? And we had this military C-130. And he says, have that guy follow that guy. Turn, follow him. And see if you can see where he's going.
Gopher 06, traffic is 11 o'clock and 5 miles northbound, fast moving, type and altitude unknown. You have the traffic, do you know what kind it is? Can you see?
Looks like a 757, sir. Looks like he's at low altitude right now, sir.
Gopher 86, turn right and follow the traffic, please.
And then he made a hard right turn, and his ground speed started clicking up as he's descending the whole time. And he was going about 500 miles an hour.
Holy shnikes.
That's an extreme speed. That's the speed you see at 35,000 feet. You don't see 500 miles an hour, 100 feet off the ground, which is about where he was when he dropped off for scope.
Washington, this is Gopher 06. Guy, it says the aircraft is down. Looks like that aircraft crashed into the Pentagon, sir.
As American 77 impacts the Pentagon, air defense jets are still 29 minutes away from Washington, D.C. The nation's capital is defenseless and under direct attack.
To hear that the Pentagon had been hit, it was pretty much all afterward. We already had the F-16s in the air. We were already trying to get them vectored towards Washington, D.C. Basically, we have no involvement with American Airlines 77.
This was now spreading, and we had to start really worrying about aircraft all over the country, where they were coming from, and that really nobody was safe.
With 3 hijacked aircraft down, United 93 remains airborne. Hijacker Zia Jara broadcasts across the airwaves.
Hi, is the captain? I would like to order the main medium. There's all aboard and going back to the airport and have our demand. So please remain quiet.
In the aircraft cabin, fearing for their lives, passengers try to call their loved ones. Mark Bingham gets through to his mother at home.
He said, Mom, this is Mark Bingham. I just want to tell you I love you. I'm on a flight from Newark to San Francisco, and there are 3 guys on board who've taken over the plane, and they say they have a bomb.
Oh, there's another one. Another plane just hit.
And then we were cut off.
After the call, Alice saw news reports of the planes crashing into the Twin Towers, and now calls Mark back with desperate advice.
Mark, this is your mom. Apparently it's terrorists, and they're hell-bent on crashing the aircraft. So if you can, try to take over the aircraft, group some people, and perhaps do the best you can to get control of it. I love you, sweetie. Good luck. Bye-bye.
Well, I felt pretty impotent and helpless leaving those messages, and
Oh my
of course,
gosh.
we were all very worried about Mark, and I was pretty desperate to. I really had despair of ever seeing my son alive again.
Control of the skies above America is now firmly in the hands of the terrorists. At the Federal Aviation Administration Command Center, Ben Sliney makes a bold decision.
I honestly felt that at that juncture that we were at war with someone. And I couldn't comprehend the scope of it, but I felt I had to do something immediately to try to gain control of the situation. And I gave the order to land all aircraft at the nearest destination. No one had ever shut down the National Airspace System prior to that day, but I felt that the best thing to do would be to clear the skies, and whatever was left we could manage with.
As aircraft land across America, United 93 remains airborne.
United 93 continued, and we watched that aircraft as it turned towards the Washington area.
Okay, United 93 is 29 miles out of, 29 minutes out of Washington, D.C. and tracking towards it.
Okay.
Do we want to think about scrambling aircraft?
Oh, God, I don't know.
That's a decision somebody's going to have to make probably in the next 10 minutes.
But no one notifies the military of United 93's predicament, and the hijackers carry on towards their target.
We knew on the ground that United 93 was coming our way. He was going to hit something.
On the plane, the terrorists contain the passengers and aircrew. From the back of the aircraft, flight attendant C.C. Lyles tries to call her husband.
Hi, baby. Baby, you have to listen to me carefully. I'm on a plane that's been hijacked. Want to tell you I love you. Please tell my children that I love them very much. There's 3 guys. They've hijacked the plane, and I've heard that there's planes that's been flown into the World Trade Center. I hope to be able to see your face again, baby. I love you. Bye.
The plane should have come apart because Ziad Jarrah was flying it so low and so fast. I can't even reflect on how horrible and how frightening that must have been for everybody on board.
While some of the passengers fight back and try to retake control of the plane, United 93 crashes in a field near Shanksville, Pennsylvania, 127 miles short of the capital.
United 93? Yes. There's a report of black smoke in the last position I gave you. It hit the ground. That's speculation only.
The military were first notified of the aircraft's hijacking 4 minutes later.
Every time I see that tower fall, it looks like a demolition. Seriously.
The voices from the airwaves on September 11th, 2001, revealed that the U.S. Air Defense and Civil Aviation Administration were completely unprepared, as a new type of war stole the lives of nearly 3,000 people. As a result of the attacks, major changes were made to airport security, and a review of the relationship between civil aviation and the military implemented a radical overhaul.
The entire morning was, in my view, characterized by chaos and confusion and uncertainty, trying to figure out what the hell was going on.
We had to make up our response as we went along, given that the most time we had was 6 minutes from notification, and I think the second most time was 2 minutes. There was just no effective way for us to respond.
I would like to tell people that a lot of people did do their jobs that day, but some of the procedures we had, we weren't prepared for it.
How could you be?
We were kind of like a day late and $1 short.
It always sits there in your gut, you know. I can't even explain. There's so many other people lost so much more, but it just didn't impact me for my life. It was terrible, and you couldn't control it. It was out of the scenario we couldn't control.
I couldn't even imagine. And I hate flying. And every time I hit turbulence, it freaks me out so bad. I almost used the F word, but like his mother said, to imagine how fast they were going at such a low altitude, everybody thought that plane would come apart because of the turbulence from the updraft, so on and so forth. Oh my gosh, my heart just really, really goes out to them. So the next thing that I had pulled up for you guys for the 20th anniversary of 9/11, this comes from the 9/11 Memorial and Museum, and these are actual oral histories. The 9/11 Memorial Museum's oral history collection documents history of 9/11 through recorded interviews with responders, survivors, 9/11 family members, and others deeply affected by the attacks at the World Trade Center, the Pentagon, and near Shanksville, Pennsylvania. Stories of those killed aboard the hijacked aircraft and those killed in the 1993 bombing of the World Trade Center are also reflected in the collection. I don't believe it was 93. No. Why does it say that? It was not 1993. It was 2001. So why does it even say that? Okay, this is not cool. But I shall carry on. So, the 2001 bombing of the World Trade Center are also reflected in the collection. The edited segments below are drawn from a collection of more than 1,000 recorded interviews. The museum continues to collect and record oral histories. Esther DiNardo, family member. On September 11th, 2001, Esther DiNardo lost her daughter, Marissa. Esther remembers how her last night, Marissa brought her to windows on top of the World Trade Center to celebrate Esther's birthday. Here is their oral transcript.
The last time I saw my daughter was the night before September 11. It was my birthday, and she asked me if I would like to go spend my birthday at the window of the world, and I said, yes, I like that. So we all went there, the whole family, and during the night we stopped by the windows, and I said, what a beautiful place. I feel like I'm up in heaven. It's so pretty. And she said to me, Mom, I got you on the top of the world. The next morning, when I saw the plane just hit the North Tower, and that's where she was, I said, I know Marissa's very strong. She's very soft heart, and she always help other people. I says, probably she's helping somebody. Probably she got down. I could not think that she was not around anymore. About a year later, a policeman called me, and he said, your daughter's name was Marissa DiNardo? I said, yes. I said, why, you found something? He says, well, we found her pocketbook. He told me to go pick her up. And that's when I really felt that she was not here anymore, when I found the pocketbook.
That was Esther DiNardo, mother of Marissa DiNardo. So Adrian Walsh, first responder. Off-duty on the morning of 9/11, firefighter Adrian Walsh responded to the World Trade Center with the second wave of firefighters to leave the Fire Department New York Ladder Company 20 on Lafayette Street in Soho. In this interview, Lieutenant Walsh recalls the fall of the North Tower.
you could see Manhattan and then not see Manhattan, and all of a sudden I looked up and there was just this explosion of confetti in the air. And I thought that was the strangest sight I had ever seen, because, confetti, certainly if there was a parade or something that you had known of, but there was nothing that I knew of, and I thought, that's bizarre. It was a tremendous amount of paper. And I couldn't see anything else because at this point I had inched behind a loft building again, and of course the radio came on and interrupted and said that there had been reports of a plane going in to the Trade Center. And as we inched along again, I could see then 3 floors of fire in the Trade Center, and I thought to myself, that's really bad, because it's a self-contained building, and it should be fire on 1 floor, not fire on many floors. And if you have fire on many floors, that is a serious problem. When you got to City Hall, I was riding on the outside of the rig. And I remember when you got to City Hall, it's almost as if you entered, it's almost as if it was a curtain and you walked into a curtain. The sky disappeared. There was air and bright light on this side, and there was just gray dust that you could barely see on this side. It was just like walking through a theatrical curtain. It was 6 inches of dust on the ground. We parked right across from the plaza, and I remember getting out. I had no mask because our rig was already down there. Our guys were already down there. So I went to the back of the rig to try to see if there was another mask, another air pack for me. And I remember going around to the rig, around the back side of the rig. And as I got to the back side of the rig, I looked up, and I don't know why I looked up, because I didn't hear anything. But I saw what I can only describe as almost like a tornado hurtling at me. Just this cloud of dust that had to be over 100 feet in the air, and it was literally circling, and it was just bearing down. I've never seen anything like that, and anything move as fast as that. And I turned around and I yelled, run, Cap, run, because the captain was behind me. And he looked up. We all took off down the block. And I honestly thought, in the midst of all that, if this is going to come down, and it's going to fall all at once as a building, if I beat the cloud, I'll beat the building. And I said to myself as I turned and started to run, I'm not going to beat this cloud. It's just moving too fast. I remember making it through the cloud, and I remember trying to walk through the amount of debris. It's unfathomable. And I remember drawing a line in the middle of my brain and putting those that I thought were dead on one side and those that I thought had a chance on the other.
That was Miss Adrienne Walsh, New York City Fire Department. Next we have Robert Gray, first responder. An expert in rescuing survivors in collapsed buildings and other high-risk situations, Arlington County, Virginia Captain Robert Gray led the department's technical rescue team in its search for survivors and the recovery of victims at the Pentagon. In this interview, Gray, who was later promoted to battalion chief, describes working the 12-hour night shift at the Pentagon.
My name is Bob Gray. I'm currently serving as a battalion chief in Arlington County Fire Department. On September 11th, I was serving as a captain at the technical rescue station. I don't remember exactly what time it was, but we heard that there was a plane that went down, in the area of Crystal City. That's our jurisdiction. That's just beside the Pentagon. By the time we reached Arlington, we were very clear that there had been a plane that had gone into the Pentagon. We're thinking, if this was intentional, what else could be going on? We got our stuff, took a fire truck over to Station 1, and when we rolled up, there was already several armed guards covering that fire station. Shortly after, they deployed my group into the Pentagon. I still remember we got off the bus with our gear and walked up to the front of the building after we had received our assignment. It was just unbelievable. And my thought was this just feels so evil. that somebody has done this, and they did it with a loaded plane. I was like, you gotta be kidding me. It was just, overwhelming. Our job was to find survivors. And it was obvious on the first floor, once we got all the way to where the plane had hit, that there weren't any survivors in that general area. It was really remarkable because you'd be on the second floor and you'd find a room that was absolutely pristine, more on the third floor than the second, but a room that hadn't been touched, that's surrounded by complete destruction. The ductwork down on the floors, the file cabinets completely ripped apart, and then one room where there's not even but a light layer of smoke on the wall, the flags hanging, the magazines sitting on the desk. I guess it was how the gas vented through the buildings under pressure and then blew certain areas up and preserved others. So, you just knew, I think we knew intuitively that within the first half hour that we weren't going to find anybody alive. But, you want to be as diligent as you can and just keep searching. I didn't leave the scene until about 12:30 that night. The first couple days, we might only shore a couple to 3 columns a shift because debris had to all be processed. We had a pile of debris that was airplane parts. There's a lot of things that had some green primer on them, and then all the honeycomb type stuff that's inside the structural sections of the wings. You knew that was an airplane. When it was all said and done, I think there was like 6 tractor trailer loads of just airplane parts. And then you had building parts, they went into a different pile. The goal was to get the building completely shored up. And at the same time, an equal goal and parallel goal was to get the bodies and to get the remains and to get the personal possessions of the people from the building. And we were able to do all that at the same time because, the debris was in some places 7 feet high up against the columns that we had to shore. At the very end, we set up a closing ceremony for the technical rescue team. We got a flag from our uniform section, nailed it up on a 4x8 piece of plywood, put the name of the team, called everybody back that was with TRT. I know there was over 40 for Arlington, and I don't know how many for Alexandria, probably another 20. And everybody got together. I said a couple words. We had requested one of the clergy from the MDW come over, and he said a prayer. And then we all went over and paid our respects. And it kind of closed the incident out for us.
So that was Chief Robert Gray from Arlington County Fire Department. Next we have Frank Rosano, survivor. A guest at the Marriott Hotel at the 3 World Trade Center on September 11th, 2001, Washington, D.C. Based attorney Frank Rosano was roused from sleep by a series of loud bangs. Confident that the FDNY would handle the situation and unaware that a hijacked airplane had struck the North Tower, Rosano delayed his departure until after the collapse of the South Tower. In this segment, Rosano describes his evacuation experience.
My name's Frank Rosano, and I always stayed at the Marriott Hotel. I remember hearing a big bang. I got up out of bed, I looked outside, and I saw papers fluttering down to the ground. I said to myself, must have been a big wind that must have blown up and blew a pane of glass out, and I turned around and got in bed. The next thing I heard was a huge explosion. The building shook as if you were in an earthquake. I turned, I looked out the window. It was as if a curtain of concrete and steel came falling down. I could feel the building breaking up around me, and I ran to the opposite side of the room. I said to myself, these are the last few moments of my life. I yell out into what was left of the hallway, is anybody there? And I hear a voice. It says, come this way. In some rubble is a fireman, and he said, I'm fine, go down the fire stairs. I got to the 4th floor landing. I yelled out. Some people who were on the 3rd floor yelled back, we're here on the 3rd floor landing, but we can't go anyplace. The fire stairs have collapsed down to the ground, so we're trapped. Within a few minutes, the fireman, who I had met on the 19th floor, comes down, and he said, look, nobody's coming for us.
We have to get out on our own. There was a huge hole in the wall at the third floor, and you were looking outside. An I-beam that had fallen from the south tower was leaning up against the landing on the third floor. The banquet manager of the hotel went down the I-beam to the second floor. I went next. I grabbed the I-beam like I was grabbing somebody's body, put my legs around it and my arms around it, and lowered myself down. So we get down to the ledge, now on the second floor. We weren't there 10 seconds. All of a sudden, I heard what I can only describe as a freight train coming at me out of the sky. That was the North Tower coming down. It was the floors pancaking one on top of the other. Clack, 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 clack. We got buried under more rubble. And I remember saying to myself, you can't be lucky enough to survive it twice. And I started to pray. When the things settled down and the rubble stopped piling up on top of us, I was still alive.
And that was survivor Frank Rosano. Next we have Diane DeFuentes, and she's a survivor as well. The person to arrive at her job in a law firm on the 89th floor of the North Tower, Diane DeFuentes, felt the impact of hijacked Flight 11 strike the building a few floors above her desk. Within a short while, Frank DeMartini, a longtime employee of the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey, found DeFuentes and a group of people from a nearby office and ushered them into a stairwell where he and co-worker Pablo Ortiz had broken through a jammed door. In this part of her oral history, DeFuentes recalls her evacuation and the vital assistance provided by DeMartini and Ortiz, who lost their lives helping others that day.
I'm Diane DeFuentes. I was on the 89th floor of the World Trade Center on September 11th, and I am a survivor. And I remember what an absolutely beautiful day it was. The sky was this beautiful blue. There were very few clouds. When I got into my office, I took one last look out the window and then went to my desk. Then all of a sudden, this bang happened. The bang and being thrown out of my chair and having the door partially open, it like all happened at the same time. And not only that, but the conference room that was on my left, the ceiling fell down and hit the table and cracked the conference room table. So all this noise happened at once. I'm getting up, said, wow, how the heck did they get a bomb up this high? Because what else could it be? I said, I think I better get my things together. And that's when I put my sneakers back on. And then while I'm getting my things together, the people from MetLife came across. And some of them had blackened faces. They said, a plane hit the building. We watched it. We saw it hit the building and our office exploded. I said, oh my God. So when they told me that, I said, all right, let me make another phone call. I called one of my dearest friend and I asked her, turn on the TV and let me know what's happening. And she said, when they showed the building on TV, she said she was trying to count the floors to see where it hit, but she just couldn't do it. I told her, listen, I know that I'm going to make it, but just in case I don't, give your daughter a big kiss for me. I love you and that I'm thinking of you and I'm going to get out of here. Because the part of me wanted to say that because I wanted to believe it. And then shortly after that, Pablo came to our door. All I remember is that yellow helmet, a flashlight, and him standing at the front door and saying, we have to go now. It was Pablo Ortiz. He got us all together. We made a turn and went directly down the hallway. But further down the hallway, at the very last door, was another exit. And he and Mr. DeMartini had broken through that door because when the plane hit the building, it buckled all of the frameworks from the doors and nobody could open doors. I'm so grateful that somebody came to that floor because even if we had gone to that exit, we wouldn't have been able to get out because it was stuck. One of the scariest things was when, I don't remember what floor we were on, but water started coming down the stairs. And it was like a waterfall. And I'm saying, oh, God, this feels disgusting. Because I'm wearing sneakers. I've got long pants on. My pants are getting soaked and they're getting dirty. And my feet are like squishing, which is the feeling I really hate. Trying to hold on to the banister so I don't fall. And there were people like huddled together because it was dark. And then Tirsa took out her keychain, and it had a little light on it. And I said, oh, wow, I have a flashlight in my pocketbook. Too many things were going on, and I couldn't think. And then I finally found it, and I held it up. And people in back, they said, thank you. But I had to turn the corner, and there was no more light for them. But I remember the worst time was when the other building went down. The lights flickered. This tremendous roar, and the stairway shook, and we're holding on to the banister, and the building is shaking, and no one said a word. It was silence until the noise had stopped, and that's when we were very afraid. I actually started to cry when we're almost out of the building. We're almost downstairs to the main floor. Tirsa and Raphael went down and disappeared. People in back of me went up and disappeared. I'm standing in this little place, and I'm by myself. And I don't know if I should run upstairs or run downstairs. And I started to cry because I didn't know what to do. And then someone who was above me said, come up this way, come this way. And I ran up the flight of stairs to meet him. I didn't want to go upstairs because, my heart's telling me that if you're going upstairs, you're going up and you're further away from the exit. But I was wrong. When I walked through that exit to the outside, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. And I realized what a mess I was when I finally saw myself, because when I walked past a store and I turned around and I looked, I didn't recognize myself because my hair was white, my pants were black to the knee, my face was covered with ash. I didn't recognize myself.
That was Diane DeFontes, and she was a survivor. So next we have Bruno Dillinger, survivor as well. From an office on the 47th floor of the North Tower, Bruno Dillinger owned and managed a small company providing art consultation services and developing culture and commercial ties between New York and various regions in his home country of France. In an oral history recorded with the museum, Dillinger recalls the first stages of his journey to safety, describing fellow survivors making their way for injured civilians in the stairwell and the collapse of the South Tower moments after he arrived at street level.
Bonjour, je m'appelle Bruno Dillinger. I came to the US when I finished business school in Paris. I got up very early that morning because I was coming back from Europe and I was still jet lagged. I went straight to the World Trade Center. Then I went up the elevator to the 47th floor, went to my office, and I still remember it very clearly. Very little people have heard the sound of plane engines when they're at full strength, full force, flying up in the sky. It's one sound that comes back to me and haunt me on occasions. And then the hit. The building swung for maybe 2 or 3 minutes. We were used to the building swinging, of course, because of, when it was on a stormy day. I was not panicked whatsoever. I was unaware of what's going on. There was no alarm, no call to evacuate the building. And suddenly I felt the urge to go. And I dropped everything and left. It took me 50 minutes to come down from the 47th floor because I left about 15 minutes after the attack. Anyway, so we went down. People were very calm. And I think everybody in the stairwell was like this, determined, but also aware that, unconsciously aware that something very dangerous was happening, and remain calm because that was the best thing we had to do. There were 3 flows of people.
the regular people like me going down. The people who were coming down from the upper floors and who were very badly injured. No skin, no hair, just burned. And they were walking or carried down by people, helped by people. And then the third flow of people was, of course, the security personnel and fire department people. Now, those people were exhausted. In some of those eyes, you could see that they knew something, that it was dangerous. Well, there was no panic whatsoever in the stairwell. Those people were concentrated, focused on doing that job. And while I was walking down, they were going up to their death.
Oh my
and
gosh.
I was walking down to live. I exited onto the sidewalk that was on Church. I turned around and looked, and I saw the World Trade Center in flames. And those flames were very, very dark orange. The smoke was very, very black against this beautiful sky, and they were big. Suddenly, darkness fell upon us with an unbelievable violence. I looked around a second time. I didn't see the tower. Instead, I heard a sound that today I cannot remember. It was so powerful, such a huge sound that I blocked it. It scared me to death, and I cannot bring it back up to consciousness. And when I said darkness, what was a beautiful day became darker than night. You couldn't see anymore. Even more striking, there was no more sound. Sound didn't go through anymore because the air was so thick that it wasn't vibrating anymore. So after this unbelievable sound of the building collapsing, everything in a few seconds turned to be darker than night with no sound, and you couldn't breathe. I was convinced I was dead because it's so big that your brain cannot process something like this.
And that's true. And that was Mr. Bruno Dillinger, survivor. So next we have Arturo Rezzi, World Trade Center engineer. As a young engineer, Arturo Rezzi oversaw construction of the World Trade Center slurry wall, built to prevent the Hudson River from leaking into the lowest levels of the Twin Towers. Rezzi was shocked by the collapse of the Twin Towers on 9/11, yet also gratified to learn that the wall remained intact. In an oral history recorded for a museum a few years before his death, Rezzi said he felt that the slurry wall wanted to stay up. He also noted his concern that had the wall been breached, the loss of life would have grown exponentially worse. Rezzi also described the strength of the 450 million year old Manhattan schist bedrock that makes the soaring skyline of New York City possible. Here is the oral history transcript of Arturo Rezzi.
I'm Arturo Rezzi. I was involved in the original construction of the slurry wall for the World Trade Center. Slurry wall is a special technique that allows for the construction of reinforced concrete wall from the ground down to any practical depth in the presence of water. And that was the problem in the site of the World Trade Center because it was adjacent to the Hudson River, and any other excavation method of construction would have to deal with an enormous amount of water, and pumping would not have been sufficient. The Port of New York Authority, who was the owner of the site, spent quite a bit of time investigating techniques, and the construction that was chosen was such that would have allowed for the excavation of the site to bedrock, because the planned building were so big and so heavy that the Port Authority would not want to rely on caissons or piling. They wanted actually to see the rock upon which they were going to be founded. And the only way in which that could be accomplished was to create a watertight enclosure that would have allowed for the excavation of the whole site, exposure of the bedrock, and then creating the foundation on the bedrock. This was the first time it was used for a building foundation. The bedrock in Manhattan is particular. Technically, it's called a mica schist, and it is composed of layers that range from almost pure mica to almost pure quartz. Mica is relatively soft and quartz is very hard. Due to the characteristic of the rock that was so variable, the designer of the building wanted to be sure that wherever they put the foundation of the building, it was an area of sound rock. The wall was designed to be retained by tiebacks, which are anchors that anchor the wall to the bedrock. The design was that when the floor system of the basement of the World Trade Center went against the wall, those anchors, those tiebacks would be cut, because if they had failed differentially, one would have failed and then one near it not, they would have put differential stresses on the wall. So in order not to have that, they were all cut. So when the building collapsed and destroyed the floor system, the wall in many areas was unsupported because the floor system was not there and the tieback had been cut. So it should have collapsed. I remember when the final level at grade was built, that's when you couldn't see anymore the slurry wall from the outside. You could still see it from the inside in the basement, where it could be visible until September 11, when it was seen again, unfortunately. If the slurry wall would have failed, the Hudson River would have come into the site and through the path tubes would have gone to New Jersey, come back on 35th and flooded all the subway system of New York. And the loss of life would have been incredible. But thank God that the structure held, and I've always said it held because it wanted to. To say thank God when 3,000 people are killed seems strange, but it could have been much, much worse.
Indeed. And that was Arturo Rizzi, World Trade Center engineer. And Robert was saying in the chat room, mineralogically speaking, the quartz area would have been a better placement, but he was saying it was kind of layered. I'm trying to get through this before we have to cut out, but Rita Calvo, survivor, a Lower Manhattan resident going to high school on the Upper West Side, Rita Calvo was in class when the students learned that the World Trade Center had been attacked. In an oral history recorded for the museum, she recalled anxiously trying to phone her parents to see if their home had been damaged. She also described how she got home that day and her father's efforts to maintain a sense of normalcy in the midst of unprecedented terror.
I'm Rita Calvo. I grew up in Tribeca. Me and my brother were part of the first Tribeca baby boom. It was a great place to grow up. Literally right in front of our windows was the World Trade Center. My whole life, I really enjoyed the World Trade Center. I enjoyed looking at it. I love them at night. Just seeing the patterns of the windows. And some offices, a whole floor would be lit up, and then other floors would just have a couple of lights here and there. I never, ever thought something would happen. There was no fear whatsoever. I went to my first class. It must have been about 9:15 at this point. And my teacher told us, he's like, 2 planes have crashed in the World Trade Center. They're both passenger airliners. It looks like terrorism. Someone did it on purpose. He said, I'm going to put the radio on. And that was the first I had heard it. There was a woman talking on the radio saying, I'm down at the World Trade Center, and both planes, and she stopped. And I just hear a roar and screaming. She was like, hold on. I felt my entire body tense up. It seems that there's been a collapse. And all I could see in my head was that tower falling north directly onto my house. And every single person in my class turned to look at me because I was the only person in there that lived downtown. I called my house. It kept ringing. But my dad was there and everything was okay. The house didn't fall on the house. It didn't fall on our apartment building. And I just hear him go, oh my God, Rita, we're sending in DD to come get you. They're not going to let you down here if you don't get down here soon. I remember we came down to Greenwich Village, and that was the first time I saw the smoke. And I couldn't believe how big and dark the cloud was, and the sky was so blue behind it. I just went upstairs to my house. I wanted to see what it was going to look like off a terrace. Having seen the World Trade Center outside my window for 16 years of my life, I went upstairs, and my dad just told me, he's like, they're both gone. I think the worst part was looking at the news and then looking outside and seeing right outside my window. And my dad handles things very strangely when he gets bad news or when something's, And one of the first things he told me to do is, like, you gotta walk the dog. So I took the dog out for a walk.
Aww.
And I'm walking, and people are running towards, uptown. Kids from Stuyvesant walking with their backpacks, and people with their briefcases just turning around and looking back in horror and disbelief. And I'm sitting there with my dog. Second day was the worst because that's when it really hit me. I noticed that there's papers everywhere, pieces of paper with burn marks on them. We were about, on Duane Street, when a piece of paper hit me in the leg. I picked it up, and it said World Trade Center 192nd floor. And it wasn't until I kept running into them that I started thinking, I was like, oh my God, like, these are from the building. And here's my dad, like, we should go to the supermarket. It was open, except there was no electricity. So everything, it's pitch black dark, everything's melting onto the floor. It was me, my dad, and my brother, like 8 firefighters who were looking for bottles of water. It was so surreal to be standing in this place shopping by flashlight. When I got home that day, I was covered in dust. Like, I could smell it. And apparently, which I only found out later, when my brother and I were still sleeping, my dad had gotten up and gone out and, using his New York Post press pass, had managed to finagle his way down below Chambers Street, where people weren't allowed. And he actually saw the buildings. And I think that really made him realize that, it was time to leave. We couldn't stay down here.
Well, thank you all so much for joining me tonight for the 20th anniversary, remembering 9/11. You guys, just never forget and remember what everyone has gone through and what people continue to go through. Until next time, nighty night, love and light. Have a wonderful rest of your weekend, and I will see you back here tomorrow night with Storytime with me, TessaTNT. Take care of my yous.